Chris Hensley is a registered representative of Cambridge Investment Research, Inc., a broker-dealer member of FINRA SIPC, investment advisor representative of Cambridge Investment Research Advisors, Inc., a registered investment advisor. Cambridge and Houston First Financial Group are not affiliated.
Good morning, everybody. You're listening to Money Matters. I'm Chris Hensley. We have a fantastic topic for you today. We have with us today Dr. Ayelet Fishbach. She is the author of the brand new book, Get It Done, and I've got a copy of it here. I've got the jacket in front of me because I'm trying to read the liner notes here as I go. But we are excited to really kind of do a deep dive into this with her. I'm going to read a little bit from the jacket here because I thought this was important. It says, a great deal of ink has been spilled on the subject of motivating and influencing others, but what happens when the person you most want to influence is you? Setting and achieving goals for yourself at work, at home, in relationships is harder than it seems. How do you know where to start? How do you carry on in the face of roadblocks and distractions? How do you decide which task and ambitions to prioritize when you're faced with more responsibilities, needs, and desires than you can keep track of? Dr. Fishbach, thank you so much for joining us. One of the reasons I wanted to talk to you about this book is that after, I'm very passionate about the show. I'm very passionate about my for-profit job that I do, that I've done for years. But after COVID and after the last 2 years, it is really hard to find some motivation. And when I started listening to the book, that's one of the things that you addressed. This book came out kind of post-COVID, after I know a lot of people are kind of going through the same things. So maybe let's just start with why. Why did you write Get It Done?
Thank you so much for having me. And you're absolutely right that this is the right time to think about how to motivate ourselves. Many of us are experiencing this crisis of motivation. I actually had no idea that the book is going to come out during COVID or during the crisis of motivation in the workplace. Obviously, you cannot plan that. You decide to write a book about 2 or 3 years before the book actually comes out. And so my original motivation was to just put order in what in my mind was a very messy room of research on motivation. And I just wanted to understand how we can organize all these interventions, all these uh, different ways of motivating ourselves that I and other people in my field have been studying for a long time. And as I was sitting to just write it down and organize it, then COVID happened. It became more relevant than ever because we just all moved to different ways of doing things. And there was this huge challenge of adjusting and learning how to keep going when things are harder, which was the silver lining for me because I was just in the midst of trying to understand how people do that.
Well, what a perfect book to come out at this time. With motivational books, these are books that I tend to go back to. I mean, over the course of my life, there are things that are on my bookshelf that I'll go back and listen to. This is feeling like one that's going to fall into that. And you have a lot. I mean, you got Angela Duckworth on here talking about the book, Carol Dweck. That got my attention. So, but one of the areas that you dive into right at the beginning is just goal setting. And you talk a lot about the importance of choosing your goal. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yes. So I have 4 elements in trying to motivate yourself in using strategies to self-motivation, which are setting a goal, monitoring progress, juggling all the other goals in your life, and leveraging social support. And you're asking about the first element, which is setting a goal. And I think that you're asking even how to select a goal, how to know that this is the right goal for me. And the right goal for you is obviously a goal that is healthy for you, that promotes what you should be promoting. But it's also ideally a goal that is intrinsically motivating, something that you enjoy doing or that feels like a purpose for you. Okay, not necessarily something that only serves some long-term benefit, but something that feels good, feels right as you're doing it. Ideally, it's a do goal and not a do not goal. So you're trying to approach something other than avoid something. And also, ideally, it's a goal that's not a chore. Okay, it's not a means. It's not something that you do in order to be able to do something else. It's something that you are doing for its own sake. It is the thing that you are trying to achieve. You might think about finding a job as having a job. Okay, you want to have a job, you want to have a career, other than setting the goal on the level of uh, finding a job, which means sending many applications and feels less motivating.
I'm going to, one of the examples that you give in the book about maybe a negative goal that was given, because you mentioned having a healthy goal, a goal that works for you, a do goal versus a do not goal. These are all very important, but sometimes the goal could be not a great goal. And you use this story about the Wells Fargo bankers as an example. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Uh, yes, Wells Fargo a few years ago came up with a great initiative, and great was spelled as a GR8. The idea was to set a goal of having each client owning 8 financial tools. Sounds like a great goal. Okay, it's also in the name. Um, Obviously, a specific target is highly motivating. We know that from research that knowing like how much or how soon is highly beneficial, and they came up with a number of 8, and it did change employees' behavior. People were selling more financial tools to the clients. Now, here's the problem. This goal just didn't fit the organization. Most of the clients didn't need 8 financial tools. There was really no way of doing that unless you will relax your ethical standards, unless you will end up selling people tools that they don't need. Often customers didn't even know that they were getting these tools, so they ended up paying for something that they didn't know they have. That resulted in a very long and ugly legal process that I'm not going to get into now, but just a wonderful example for how setting an ambitious target will influence your behavior, but might not influence in the direction that you want to go.
Absolutely. And that one stuck out to me because I remember the class action lawsuits that came out of that. So I was like, oh yeah, I remember when that happened. Now that has to do with numbers, and we're here on the show we're very focused on numbers. One of the things you talk about is putting a number on it. Go a little bit further into that for us.
Numbers or targets tell us how much and how soon. I want to save that much money by the end of the year. By the end of the month, I want to walk that many steps. I want to have that many clients or followers or whatever. Okay, again, by a certain date. The nice thing about targets is that we really want to get to this number. We would feel like we are losing if we are just below that number. Okay, if you set your target as walking 10,000 steps per day, you would feel like you haven't done enough if you are 100 steps below that target, and you actually don't care very much if you are 100 steps above the target. It's really the target becomes the thing that you are pursuing. And there's some really wonderful analysis of the distribution of marathon running times in the US. And what the researchers that looked at it found is that there are many more people that finish the marathon just below 4 hours, like a couple of minutes below 4 hours, than a couple of minutes above 4 hours. Now, what's going on? Obviously, it's not easier to run a marathon under 4 hours than above 4 hours, but the 4 hour mark that for many marathon runners is the target is a motivational tool. Okay, they really want to meet that precise number. Anything above it is seen as a loss. Okay, I didn't make it. And so targets are wonderful. Okay, they get us going, but in a way, we already mentioned that. Targets can also lead us astray. Okay, targets can take over. We might forget why we are pursuing the goal. We might focus too much on the target. My son, who's just turned 10, was waving his hand the other day, telling me that he can get his step count just by waving his hand, up in the air. Obviously, he confuses the idea of walking many steps with the idea of getting to the number that you're trying to get to on your watch. So, targets confuse us. Okay, we often replace pursuing the goal with pursuing the target.
Well, that's important. I know as people try to reach for their goals, there's tools to get them there. The target can be one of them, and then seeing it from that bigger picture is a good way to look at it. But anytime somebody tries to reach a goal or a target, sometimes they can be disillusioned along the way. The next section in the book, you call it "Keep Pulling." And you talk about, increasing motivation or making progress towards that goal. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yes, there are basically two ways in which you can monitor your progress, and I'm like speaking in a very like broad terms. You can either
Right.
look at what you have achieved or what is yet to achieve. Okay, if you want to save a certain amount of money this year, you can look at how much money you have saved, how much money you still need to save. If you run a charity, you can see like how many donations you got, how many donations are still missing. If you are monitoring your progress toward an academic degree, you can look at how many classes you already completed and how many classes are still remaining. And the way you monitor your progress matters for your motivation. In particular, at the beginning, it makes more sense to look back, okay, to see how many steps you have completed. And beyond the midpoint, it makes more sense to look ahead and see how far are you from reaching your goal. Again, to give you an example from a study, we did a study with a loyalty program in a restaurant actually in Seoul, in South Korea, where we found that when we give people feedback on the number of purchases that they made, the number of lunches that they already purchased, they are more motivated to come back until the midpoint. Okay, so they had to in that program have 10 lunches to win a free lunch until 5 lunches. If they looked back, they got the feedback on how many lunches they already did, they were more motivated to come back. Beyond the midpoint, if they looked ahead, they were more motivated. If we gave them feedback specifically, these are how many lunches you are away from your free lunch, they were more likely to come back and get their lunch in the restaurant that was working for us. This is just one example from a restaurant study, but we see it with studying for exams. We see it with charities. Up to the midpoint, when you are starting something new, look back, then switch to looking ahead.
Wow, that is interesting. What you just told us was the looking at what you're achieving or what you're yet to achieve, and you said, at the beginning, looking backwards, there's value to that, but then also forward looking after you hit that midpoint. Uh, Very, very interesting. You talked about getting feedback with this study that you did. One of the things you talk about is negative feedback. How can we learn from negative feedback, or where does that play a role?
Oh, it's hard to learn from negative feedback. It's the reason we constantly hear that we need to learn from negative feedback because we don't. It's too tempting to ignore negative feedback. What we find in motivation science is that people often either just ignore completely the negative feedback, they don't remember. Okay, you told them that their answer was wrong and they don't remember what their answer was. Okay, or that they derive the wrong lesson, they learn that they cannot do it. Okay, they say, okay, well, this is not for me. This task is not for me. This job is not for me. obviously not good at it. Here I got the negative feedback. What we want people to learn from negative feedback is how to do things. Okay, this is the lesson. Okay? You learn to do something by learn how not to do it. Let's take a very simple task in which there are only two possible answers. Well, if I told you that one answer is wrong, what I'm hoping that you learn is that the other answer is right. Okay, if you learn that one way to approach a problem or approach a customer or approach a colleague is wrong, we hope that you learn that this is not the way to approach it. You need to use something else. And this is not trivial for people. It's not trivial because it requires cognitively that you understand that if something doesn't work, you need to try something else. So it's learning by elimination. It's also not easy because emotionally we tend to disengage or feeling hurt and not quite do the analysis by which if something doesn't work, then the other thing could work.
Now, one of the things that you talk about is goal juggling. I know that everybody who attempts to do something or has a target or a goal, that's an issue. So that sometimes you feel overwhelmed, like you have too much stuff to do or too many goals. What can you tell us about goal juggling?
I like that you say sometimes. I would say that most of the time. you, you rarely have one goal, okay? And often for each action that you're pursuing, there are many goals that you wish to satisfy. Okay? You choose your food. You want it to be tasty. You want it to be healthy. You want it not to be too expensive. You have a bunch of goals that you're trying to juggle just with a single action. And a few things here. One is that you need to decide whether you are prioritizing or compromising. Okay, you prioritize when you have one goal that is more important than the other. Okay, maybe the other goal is a temptation, is not really something that you want to do, but you feel tempted to do. Okay, think about your goal to be healthy and your temptation to eat certain foods or drink certain things. You might want to prioritize the health over something else. For other goals, you want to compromise. Okay, maybe you want to find the right balance. Actually, maybe you want to find the right balance between food that you like and food that you think is good for you. Maybe you want to find the right balance between career and family. And so I suggest that first decide whether these goals should be something that you pursue at the same time. You should juggle between them. You should compromise or prioritize. And then I give advice how to do each of them.
And we've got, just about 10 minutes before the end of the show here. Some of the things you just mentioned, that finding that balance, prioritizing, compromising, the temptation versus your health sometimes, whether it's a health goal or what have you. One of the other areas that you talk about is social support. Tell us a little bit about how social support plays into our goals or our motivation.
Social support is absolutely critical. And when I was sitting down to look at how people motivate themselves, what have we learned? I immediately found out that many of the interventions that we use for others and for ourselves involve leveraging social support. And why is social support so important? Well, in two ways. Okay, first, there are many goals that we pursue with other people. Okay, we start a business with other people. We work on a project with our colleagues. We also start a family, with another person at least. We work with other people on our professional and personal goals. The other aspect is that even for our personal goals, for the things that we are doing by ourselves, other people are around us and they are either an inspiration or that they stand in the way. Okay, their approval is critical. Role models are critical. And doing something when your immediate environment feels that this is foolish, that this is not something that they would support, is extremely hard. It what makes people leave their group, okay, and go to another place where their passions are supported and appreciated. And so if I can step back and talk about the first element, like how do we do things with other people, this is a big challenge. Okay, we know that in every work meeting, people are thinking less hard than if they thought about the same problem by themselves. So a lot of research on social loafing and our tendency to work less hard when other people are helping. There are strategies to address that. Okay, identifying who did what is one way to reduce this tendency to let go and work less hard when other people are helping me. I also talk about coordination and how to best work with people so that we don't have 10 cooks in the kitchen. We are not trying to all solve the same problem. But on the other hand, we don't end up with one expert, okay, one person in the group that knows it all, and the other people might not know much. I give the example of research with married couples, and married couples have this tendency to divide their finance such that one person is doing most of the financial decisions for the household, and the other person has their bank account written on a post-it note. This is a problem, right? Because, at one point, this person who didn't know anything might find themselves having to take charge. Maybe the couple is no longer a couple with the older people. Maybe the person with the knowledge is unfortunately not longer with us. And then now we have the need to know something about handling your finance as the person who didn't do it. So that was a bit of a diversion, but I wanted to give an example for how to coordinate shared goals.
Very important. I that you hit a nerve with me on that one because I have dealt with that real life situation so many times as a financial advisor. Couples that aren't commingling their accounts, and for whatever reason they've divided them, and then you have a widow or a widower who has no knowledge of the finances as a whole, and so you end up thinking you're helping and doing a disservice to your spouse. So that's a very great real life example there. Well, we're actually right here towards the end of the show. The book for listeners, Get It Done. It is available on Amazon. If you'd like to find out more information, the website that you gave me earlier is going to be your name. So it's going to be Ayelet, your last name, FISHBACH.com. Is that correct?
Yes, it's
There we go.
ayeletfishbach.com.
Making sure there. And for listeners, don't feel like you have to write that down. We'll have that in the links on the podcast notes. Dr. Fishbach, is there anything I haven't asked you that you'd like to leave with listeners?
Well, I wrote a book that there are many things that you haven't asked me, and I encourage people to learn more about motivation science. There is so much that we explored as a field on how you can stay motivated, how you can motivate others. And my current mission in my life is to make sure that people have this knowledge, that it doesn't stay in our small field. So help you so much for so sorry, let me say thank you so much for helping me spread the word, and I hope that people use these tools.
Absolutely. This is a message we all need right now. So thank you so much. Have a good rest of the day.
You too. Thank you.